Hello? Hello? Who's that? Whoa! Water!
What's up? What's up? Thanks for joining us tonight for the Tuesday night edition of Ghost Chat Radio. This is the Paranormal Diva, Jodi Smith, your host, and your other host, the Paranormal Rebel, Jason Stanton, will be joining us shortly. And we've got a terrific guest for you tonight, Mr. Thomas Fusco. He is an author, and he wrote a terrific, really fascinating book called Behind the Cosmic Veil, a new vision of reality merging science, the spiritual, and the supernatural. So I can't wait to get into that. How you doing tonight, Thomas?
Oh, great, Jodi. Excuse me. Just clearing my throat. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for joining us. We've been really excited to hear all about your experiences, you know, to be a little bit more scientific, a little something different than what we did last night. So the way that we normally like to start out the show is by covering a couple of weird, true stories that Jason and I have gathered from around the web. So I'm going to read a couple of stories, and then you and I can talk about it. And I want to let everybody know that we have a new thing that we're doing tonight, and it's called Dumbass Trivia. So what's going to happen is at some point I'm going to throw out a couple of special key either code words or secrets about someone, and we'll just see how well you guys are paying attention. Because Jason has a couple of really nice Ghost Chat Radio coffee mugs to give out. So if you can call in with the right answer and you're the first one to do it, you will win. So those are the rules. So the first thing I want to mention tonight is, that we had a loss here in the paranormal world, and I'm sure so many of you knew him or were very familiar with his work, but Frank Sumption has passed away, and of course he was the creator of the Ghost Box, also known as the Frank's Box, of course. So I'm just going to briefly touch on a little article that I have about Frank, and it's a large, it's a huge loss to the community. I'm sorry to hear that he passed away. He really wasn't even that old, so it was kind of a surprise. But the device was developed by Sumption, the Frank's Box, back in 2002, and it utilized the concept of electric voice phenomena, EVP, to speak to spirits. And the method with the Frank's Box was that the background noise is recorded by a microphone and then analyzed in the belief that voices can be heard in the static. Now, he was a very eccentric EVP enthusiast, and he claimed at the time that even the design for this device, when he created it, had actually been received from the spirit world, via a transmission to him. And, the article says that Frank never really put his devices up for general sale, but instead created only a very limited run of about 180 units in his lifetime, and he distributed them to a select people, a few people who he felt should have one. And I happen to know, I would have loved to be one of those recipients, but I did not know Frank. But I do know a couple of of people who, Chip Coffey for one, who was personally given a box made by Frank. And I do know that he did sell a few of the boxes over the years, but, to people that he knew, to people that he knew and trusted. So, despite the highly controversial nature of his invention, and some people think a lack of evidence to actually suggest that it had ever been able to communicate actually with the dead, the Frank's box really did influence the field of EVP, I think, like nothing before. It sort of ushered in a new era of paranormal investigation. And, from there, like I have a Shack Hack, which is sort of a cheap modified version of a Radio Shack radio, for those of you that don't know. And it works. It picks things up. It takes a little practice. You have to sort of get the hang of it. But there's a lot of other spirit boxes that have now been developed, and even now there's new ones being developed all the time to help us really learn as much as we can about EVP. So did you know Frank at all, Thomas?
No, not at all. And
no. Okay.
I might just to let your audience know so that there's no confusion. I myself am not a paranormal investigator.
Okay.
What I am is a scientific theorist, and that I have taken the body of paranormal phenomena as a very important collection of evidence to tell us much more about how the universe actually works. So when it comes to the paranormal investigators and investigating as such, I may not be as well versed as someone who's very active in that end of the field.
Right. Well, no, and that's okay, because we, here on Ghost Chat, we really like to cover all different sorts of supernatural and paranormal topics, and we love anything involving science. I mean, we just cover all kinds of things. Super casual here. So, no, that's great, and we really like to mix it up. So, that's terrific.
Jodi, I wanted to ask you, though, what did Frank die from?
What? Oh,
what did
he know?
What did he pass away from?
I don't know for sure. It didn't say in the article, and I know that his family has been chatting on Facebook. So I'm not sure if it was, it's a surprise to me. And a lot of people seemed very surprised. They were like, I just talked to Frank. Literally, people had talked to him that day or the day before. He was actively, in social media and, close with a lot of people in the paranormal who regularly converse with him. So I think it was rather sudden. I think he may have had a heart attack. But I can't confirm that for sure. It's not in a particular article that I pulled out. And even the article that I had posted, a different one on Facebook, it didn't really say what happened with him. Just, I see his funeral arrangements and things are posted on there for people that would like to go. I think he did live out in Colorado with his family, I think.
Well, there you go. The reason why I was asking is, and I'm sure we'll get into it later in the show, is some of the kind of exciting and interesting and at times a little bit disturbing physical evidence that has been collected recently. And, it has something to do with health issues.
Interesting.
And so hopefully we'll be able to get into that a little bit later in the show, but I don't really want to talk about it now because I'd be putting the cart before the horse for the audience. I don't really want to do that.
I'd love to talk about it. All right, well, let's go on. We're going to talk about a couple of other weird news stories that I have for you, and this one is actually from the Inquisitor.com, and it says, and I, just so you know, I'm a fan of Ouija boards. I've always liked them since I was a child and have always worked with them. So I actually own a few of them. But I've never been possessed by one. And this article says 3 people ended up being rushed to a hospital after being allegedly possessed during a Ouija session. So weird, right? Alexandra Huerta, her brother Sergio, and their cousin Fernando Cuevas have been playing around with a Ouija board in the Mexican village of San Juan Tenko, when all three of them started to weirdly just exhibit strange behavior. And, within minutes of beginning the session, Alejandra was said to have fallen into a deep trance-like state before growing maniacally like a dog and just thrashing around uncontrollably. Then the people that were with her, Sergio and Fernando, soon began to experience strange symptoms of their own, including vivid hallucinations, blindness, deafness. I mean, a local Catholic priest was actually called in to perform an exorcism. Now, and this kind of gets me. He allegedly refused to help them because none of them were regular churchgoers. I mean, can you imagine? Now, I'd like to know what kind of hallucinogenic drugs they were taking before they broke out the Ouija board, some kind of party was happening, I think. But
one thing's for sure, but they weren't putting any money in the right basket, right?
Apparently not. And you know what? I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. So that kind of blows my mind because, even the paranormal investigations groups, we all, well, some of them don't, but they should. We all do it for free. We're all here to help people. So for a Catholic priest to come in to perform an exorcism and he goes there and then refuses to do it because they weren't regular churchgoers or parishioners, that just fucking blows my mind, So paramedics did attend the scene, and the ones who went there, they found themselves having to forcibly restrain Alejandra for her own safety before taking all three of them to the hospital, and they treated them with a combination of painkillers and anti-stress medication. Well, that probably gave them some more hallucinations. Who knows? But, right? Imagine. Can you imagine? Yeah, let's just give them some more drugs. But they said it seemed to be effective at treating the symptoms that they were exhibiting. And, the medical rescue of these three young people was very complicated, said a public safety director, Vicar Deniza, and it appeared as if they were in a trance-like state, apparently after playing with the Ouija board. And they spoke of feeling numbness in their limbs, experiencing double vision, blindness, deafness, hallucinations, muscle spasms, difficulty swallowing. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, and again, I have a lot of experience with this, and I've never, ever seen anything like that. And honestly, any of my friends who are also intuitives or psychics who are comfortable with witch boards or Ouija boards, I don't know anybody who has had this type of an experience. So it's crazy. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, personally, no, although you hear anecdotally about certain reports. I know that one lady who is very well known in this field, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, wrote a book. I think she published it last year called Ouija Board Fiascos. Okay. Where she talks about, she talks about these kinds of, boards gone wild, and it can be, I myself personally don't think that it's a good thing to play with for most people. Because you are dealing with certain things that you're not aware of, that you're not familiar with,
No, you're absolutely right, Thomas. And play being the operative word there, nobody should play with it. If you don't know what you're doing and you're not experienced, it's not something to play with. It's definitely not a game, for sure. So I'll have to check that book out. You're going to have to email me that information, and I will post it on the Ghost Chat Radio fan page for anyone who might be interested in looking at that book. And I mean, I've had a lot of experiences with, I'm a natural psychic. I'm a fourth generation psychic in my family since I was a little child, and I have had a lot of experiences, but where the planchette can be moving very quickly on the board. Definitely, I've had a lot of spirit communication, and but never where I felt like I was possessed, or where anyone else who was with me at that time felt possessed. I could understand a little bit of a trance-like state maybe, but this is crazy. So that'll be interesting to read her book for sure. I mean, and this is new. This is a new article, so interesting.
Yeah, I don't have any more information on the book itself other than its name. It's Ouija Board Fiascos.
Okay.
And when I first heard about it, I said, all right, Rosemary, that sounds like a home run, that one.
Yeah.
But as far as the other aspect of the story, another aspect of the story, there is a very strong prejudice in the Christian community.
I know.
Against these kinds of things. And in my book, Behind the Cosmic Veil, I actually devote a little bit of space talking about that. And actually, there's a chapter that's called The Paranormal Bible.
Okay.
And I kind of explain why most of this prejudice is unwarranted and, what the real spiritual focuses should be. That's something that is not uncommon.
Yeah. And let's face it, back in the day, in the Dark Ages, people did regularly consult with these types of things, table boards or witch boards, and they've evolved and changed a little over the years, and the ritual of it has changed a little over the years as well. But, anytime you're trying to do spirit communication, you've got to protect yourself, of course. And I just don't think it should be a religious thing, and it's completely against the religion that I was raised in, absolutely. But, so is
naughty
consulting.
Girl, you. You naughty girl.
Well, I am a naughty girl. Everyone knows that for sure. We all know that. Everybody listening knows. But, we just had a recent guest on, too. I don't know if you're familiar with Karen Dahlman, and she just wrote a terrific new book about, 20 years or so of her personal experience with boards, and she loves, her love affair with boards, definitely. And that is we had a fascinating interview with her as well. But, when Jason and I were discussing it recently and also discussing it with Karen and a couple of other guests, really the way to look at it, I think, is it's just a tool. I mean, what is so different about, you're trying to do spirit communication with your K2 meter? I have a K2, I have a Mel meter, or people that are putting down a flashlight and saying, I want you to turn it off, or, flash yes for once, or, don't turn it on if it's no. These are all just conduits for trying to gain spirit communication. And really, it's just a board. It doesn't have any power until you give it power through using it with your own personal energy,
Hey, I understand what you're saying. I think for me, and I speak on a professional level.
Yeah,
because,
sure.
there's certain professional positions that I take that I have to take from a professional point of view. And then there's certain personal opinions that I have. But I like to speak from the professional point of view in these areas. And what I say is that, what we need to do, or at least what I'm involved in doing, is understanding the phenomenon to try to understand what's actually going on, particularly from a physical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, understand better essentially how the universe is assembled, how it's put together. If we have a valid observation and current scientific models of the way the universe is put together
mm-hmm.
do not encompass these observations or have no place for these observations in their system, then that system is somehow incomplete or flawed. And so that's my pursuit as I mentioned earlier, I consider this whole realm of paranormal and supernatural an essential body of evidence and observations and data that must tell us something about the nature of reality.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely.
So that's where my focus is on it.
I can't wait to read your book now.
Well, that's great. That was pretty forward, wasn't it?
And absolutely. And no, I love science. I'm not a scientist, but I'm definitely a science freak for sure. So, if it's anything over my head, I'll definitely have questions for you. But all right, we've got another story, and this is just basic. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake conducted a study to see if we can really tell who is calling on the phone before picking up, And this is in the Epoch Times. And, if you've ever received a phone call out of the blue that you weren't expecting, but somehow you found that you knew who was on the other end before you even picked up the phone, then you weren't alone. The phenomenon of telephone telepathy is definitely not a new one. And, I've experienced this so many times. But I swear the ring sometimes sounds different when it's my daughter calling. I am not kidding. I always know when it's her. Of course, she always needs something, so it always feels urgent. But in a recent experiment, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake tested this concept. He had a group of volunteers, and he asked them to answer a telephone call after writing down in advance who they believed was on the other end out of a possible selection of 4 options. Now, and most of us don't have 4 options. It could be anyone. But the results seem to show a higher than expected tendency for the volunteers to correctly guess who's phoning. The average scores were very significantly above the 25% hit rate, which was expected by chance. So they scored definitely higher. And in his research, which was published in the Institute of Noetic Science earlier this year, Sheldrake claims that several other studies, including those conducted at the University of Amsterdam in Holland and the University of Freiburg in Germany, have also shown very similar results. The phenomena was actually found to be even more prominent when the person phoning shared a strong emotional bond with the recipient, just like I was saying with my daughter. So is there really some form of telepathy going on here, or are these results simply the result of random chance? The only way to resolve these questions is by means of continued experimental tests that can be evaluated statistically, said Sheldrake. But these tests gave positive, statistically significant results. So it's kind of fascinating, really, What do you think, Thomas?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Dr. Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh, you know him. Oh, good. Okay.
Well, I know of him, and
yeah,
I'm familiar with his work, yes.
Okay,
and,
great.
Oh, excuse me.
I tried to get you a little science.
There you go. I mean, as we were talking earlier about Ms. Guiley's book, I would also recommend for anyone who is interested in some of the fallacies and some of the weaknesses of the establishment of mainstream science should pick up a copy of Sheldrake's latest book, Science Set Free.
Science Set Free. Okay.
Yeah, it's got a different title in Europe. I forget that, but the publishers decided to give it that particular title for the United States.
Okay.
What we're looking at here is something that is statistically significant. And assuming Dr. Sheldrake, of course, being thoroughly familiar with the scientific method, has conducted the experiment with the proper types of controls, then this is scientifically significant. The next step, as he says, and this is fundamental to the Baconian, or what we call today the scientific method, that was invented by Sir Francis Bacon way back when, is that repeatability, replication is one of the hallmarks of science. In other words, we need other teams to actually set up the same kinds of experiments under very similar, if not ideal, conditions, and to replicate those results. And so that's what Dr. Sheldrake is doing. And it is the greatest of challenges when you're dealing with alternative theories and alternative ideas to get mainstream scientists or physicists to adopt these things and replicate them. One thing that the general public is not normally aware of, or most of them are not aware of, they don't stop to think about it, is that scientists do not fund their own experiments for the most part. Their research is funded by governments, institutions, businesses, organizations, these kinds of things. And they're looking for
private patrons even, sure.
Yeah, and in most cases what they're doing is they're looking for hard results. You know, they're saying that we will pay for research in anode-cathode technology so that we can triple the efficiency of lithium-ion batteries. You know, there's a payoff.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And, to get that kind of funding, generally speaking, the scientists or the scientific institution involved has got to be squeaky clean. And so when you're talking to governments and institutions and businesses about people who do gook and spook research, which is what I call it, them are the boys that do not get hired. So there's certainly a very strong prejudice and a very strong fear. I know personally of two different practicing physicists that, because of their professional positions, although we have conversations privately that would be quite interesting, I'm sworn to secrecy. I cannot mention their names.
That's okay.
But that's the point that I'm trying to say, that this is still a very widespread prejudice and an undercurrent that affects this kind of research.
Yeah, it's a shame, but I know it is very stigmatized, and we like to think that the science of the supernatural and paranormal research is getting to be more mainstream, and there's a much more mainstream audience now. People are much more comfortable with it. They're more familiar with it. The general population, I think, much more so than they were 5-10 years ago. But I can imagine how difficult it is for the scientific community and the frustrations that they must go through trying to get funding for these types of sort of woo-woo, off-the-wall projects.
Yes.
It's got to be tough.
Jodi, you have to ask yourself the obvious question. Where's the payoff?
Right.
In other words, okay, let's say we discover that there is definitely a parapsychological effect that is real.
Right.
And other kinds of experiments like this have been done for, decades, and they've got statistically significant results. Okay, what's the payoff?
Right.
In other words, how do you exploit that economically, for profit, governmentally? How do you use it, turn it into a weapon?
Of course.
Yes, exactly. And so, what they're talking about is, let's say, if I could use this to develop it as a weapon, and I put it in the hands of a soldier, I don't care whether there's a 67% probability that it'll work when you pull the trigger. I want a 100% probability. What's all this mumbo jumbo? You know, this doesn't tell me anything. You know,
well,
it just tells me that
yeah,
under these conditions, you know, 1 out of 4 times when I turn my flashlight on, it'll go on. And you're telling me you got statistics that say now it'll go on 50% of the time. All right, how do I make money off of that? What do I do with that? And so that really is one of the issues that need to be kept in mind. Now, Dr. Sheldrick, of course, he's already considered a screwball.
Oh, is he?
In the mainstream community. Oh, yeah, he's in la la land. You know, from the mainstream perspective. So he has nothing to lose. He's already blacklisted.
Oh, I see. So he can just keep on, you know, researching all the crazy stuff he wants to research just for the fun of researching it. Then, if he can if he can keep some money coming in. And of course, I'm aware. I know so many people get shut down, their research facilities, or their funding doesn't come through again because of what you said. There's no payoff. Their patrons don't see where it's going, and so they pull the plug on it. It happens all the time. But I mean, telepathy, it's been interesting, but I mean, it's always been interesting, and I know the government has always been interested in that, and I know that they still have some programs going on, but I think it's much more limited than it was, you know, once upon a time.
Well, yeah, it's much more clandestine, and you know, the government's, you know, now deny, we don't have anything involved with that at all.
Right.
You know, because at a certain point, this kind of research really became, you know, like a social stigma in a way, where for a while, for a short period of time, it became something where people accepted it. The general public accepted it and said, well, yeah, that's interesting work. That's this, that's that. But people don't realize oftentimes how very powerful public opinion is. Like in my interviews, I tell people in the paranormal community when they say, well, we should do this and we should do things this way and this and that. And I tell them, you're missing the point in part, because lots of people look at their fields as a closed universe. Most paranormal investigators and paranormal enthusiasts look at the paranormal community as a closed box. But in the end, it's the general public that determines what is acceptable and what is mainstream. And I'll give you an example. The plumbers, as a couple of my friends are fond of calling them.
I know. Yes, I know the
we all
plumbers.
know who we all know who the plumbers are.
We all know who the plumbers are. Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. What has happened over time, and every paranormal investigator that's actually engaged in the community is well aware of what I'm about to say, is that from the general public watching those shows and those investigation techniques have now become the accepted standard. So that if you go on a private home investigation and you're not investigating the way the plumbers do, then you're doing something odd and weird. But if you do everything that they do, then you're legitimate. It's almost like you got a certification in it. Even though you may have no idea what you're doing, as long as you're mimicking what was seen on TV, you're doing it right. You were qualified. So these kinds of standards in the field are being set by entertainers.
Right.
And that's one of the problems in the field also.
It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and because of what you just said, that they watch TV for a few years, they get excited, you know, you get a few friends, you buy a tape recorder and a camera, and that's it. You've got a paranormal team. and you're going
That's
in.
it. Just like when I was
Yeah.
a teenager, we used to call them garage bands.
Exactly.
Where you would go and you hear, man,
Yes.
that Rolling Stones album was really cool, man. Hey, let's put together a band and play in your
jam.
dad's garage.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
jam.
and that's what has happened.
The week after, 2 weeks later, after they do their first home investigation, oh my God, they've got an internet television show either on YouTube or some network somewhere, and they have no idea what they're doing. And not only that, they don't know, when they go into a location, regardless of what they may find, they don't know if they really found something or if it's the plumbing. Or, they don't know.
Interesting choice of terms.
There was knocking in the wall in the bathroom. Oh my God. But could it just been the plumbing? Could be that there was some sort of an electrical current, because of your faulty wiring that made you feel nauseous while you were sitting in your family room and close to the phone. And that's what it is that they're just guessing, and they haven't just, evaluated, situations long enough to really be able to help people. And I mean,
sure.
And I don't want to discourage anyone. Like, of course, we want anyone who's interested in the paranormal to try to learn more. But it is better to learn from more experienced investigators instead of throwing together a whole new team of newbies. And some people in remote locations may not have that. They may not be able to find someone that wants to work with them or wants to talk to them. But God, at least read a couple of books, before you go out there. But they don't put any science into it. They just kind of jump in and, they've watched one too many episodes of the Ghost Adventurers, and they want to go in there and start calling out ghosts like they're, they think they're Zach Bagans. And that's never,
They've seen Zach get possessed one too many times.
I'm telling you. And, hey, don't get me wrong, I love to watch Zach, but he's been getting possessed a little bit more frequently lately.
The thing is, the point I'm trying to make, and kind of talking about this kind of parlays into what we'll be talking about tonight in greater detail, is the science of it. And what my hope is, and part of my goal certainly is that because we lack any kind of a standard in this field, from the public's point of view, and again, we have to keep in mind that the public is the final judge. If anybody questions that, think about all the scientists and the scientific evidence that there is for climate change. Mm-hmm. But we do not act on it because the public at large has not signed on. They haven't come on board. So the evidence can be there till the cows come home, and all the scientists can be screaming, this is real, this is real, this is real. But until the public signs on to it, it has no strength. It has no gravitas, as they say.
Right.
So for me, when I look at the paranormal field, I say, number one, there has to be a standard. Number two, that standard, I believe, can only be accomplished with science. And the third thing is that for the general public to sign on to that particular standard, there has to be a payoff. There has to be a practical exponent that says, okay, if we conduct this research, this is what we're looking for. We're not looking for gooks and spooks.
Right.
We're not looking for your dead Aunt Mary. We're not trying to find where dead Aunt Mary hid the car keys. What we're trying to do is discover the hidden laws of science that govern these phenomena. Now, here's the payoff.
Yeah.
What if we discover these laws what would we be able to do? Well, perhaps we'll be able to generate free energy, like the electromagnetic fields that emerge out of nowhere at paranormally active sites, that we are able to affect communications over long distances with, very simple technology, that we will be able to master things like anti-gravity, levitation, that we will understand how to bypass the normal confines of gravity based on the types of levitations and other things that are observed at paranormally active sites. Now there's a payoff. Now you've got the public on board, but you're not going to get them on board with, gook and spook sightings or talking to dead Aunt Mary.
Right. Because they can't buy into that. There's nothing tangible for them to believe in there. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, because the only payoff is, do you believe? Do you believe that paranormal is real? So what if I do or don't? What difference does that make to me in my personal life?
Right.
It doesn't mean any different. That from all the stuff I've seen, even on TV or whatever, or read about, dead Aunt Mary isn't telling anybody anything that they can use practically in this world. Nobody got told what the afterlife is and what it's like. They never talk about that stuff. So there's no payoff. And believe me, some people listen to me and say, oh, that guy's really negative and this and that. I want your listeners to understand that I'm not being condescending in any way. What I'm trying to do is address the hard realities of the field and what the future of it's going to be. Once the populist fad fades. It's like K plus 8 can't find work anymore either, and neither will the plumbers at a certain point. And then what compounds this field, and I've had people that got angry at me for saying this, is that everybody does it for free. And the reality, forget about the nobleness or the idealism. Let's talk about hard reality. The hard reality is that since it's free, nobody cares. As long as the investigators come in and duplicate what they see on TV, that's fine. And then the investigators have no obligation to show any kind of credibility because the customer isn't paying anything. Think about other professions. Yeah, think about other professions. And people will get mad and say, oh, gee, if I had to pay a license fee to form a garage band, I'd never be able to do it. Well, at some point in time, we have to take a look at this kind of thing. When you got plumbers or electricians or any kind of field, they have associations and they have accreditations. And in most cases, governments, like state, local, and federal governments, when they set up regulations or laws to regulate these kinds of fields, they themselves do not establish the standards. They adopt the standards of the organizations that represent those fields. So, to be a licensed contractor in a state, you have to, comply and prove that you are able to conform to the standards that weren't originated by the government, but originated by the associations that represent those fields. And this is hard reality. This is, this is out of the hobby field, out of the, woo-woo field, out of the thrill-seeking field and the trophy hunting field, and getting into the hard reality to how this is going to, this field and this kind of research is going to transition from the circus that it is now to a very serious and respected discipline.
See, and I think that would be so great. I mean, even with I do have my own team. I'm going to have to build a new one because I'm getting ready to move to a different state. But, I'm incorporated. I've been incorporated for years. Like, we try to be very professional. I do house investigations, and no, we don't charge people, but I limit how many of those I do. Like, I did so many of them years ago that, I'm more interested in researching historic locations and, more interesting locations at this point, in my life. But there has to be a standard, and you're right. There is no accreditation. There's no ongoing education, or anything like that. And it does hurt the credibility of the field. I so agree with you. And my interest in the paranormal and in just the science of researching started, way back when I was in high school, before it was and I'm older than I look, believe me, before it was a thing. I am definitely older than I look. We won't say how old I am. That's not our dumbass trivia question. But it's really changed, and you're right. I think that a lot of these groups, maybe this period in time is going to wear off, and a lot of these groups that are just in it trying to be somebody, or they think they're the next Taps, or they want to be on TV, like, if that's the only reason you're getting into the field, then get out. Because that's so not what it should be about, and it should be about the science and the research and the learning. And I've had so many interesting experiences over the years that, listen, Thomas, there's things I definitely cannot explain that I've been through. It's crazy, but something's definitely got to be done. I mean, even the Astrology Association has a board. They're based out of Georgia. There's some guidelines there for what people have to go, kind of go through. So why not have it for the paranormal field as well? I don't see why not, or require business licenses. And, if you can't do it, I mean, I incorporated for reasons of, if someone breaks something, or we're in a home, or, I don't want to get sued personally, it's the smart thing to do. And I know not everyone can afford it, but it is the smart thing to do.
Well, here's the thing, Jodi, is that, and if you've seen my, media page on my website, I've been on hundreds of interviews.
Yes.
And I've spoke to many people in the paranormal field, and what I find is they all agree that these are all things, good goals, good ideas for goals that they would like to see happen. But when I bring up the actual things that would need to be done to make that happen, all I get is resistance and argument.
Really?
Because nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to do what is necessary. I shouldn't say no one, but well over 95% do not want to do what would need to be to bring this field to the next level. Number one, it's hard. Number two, it's hard. Number three, it's hard. It's difficult. It's no longer a game. It's no longer a hobby. No longer fun. No longer thrill-seeking. You say, there should be a way for investigators to charge. Oh, that's awful. That's horrible. That's immoral, unethical. What they're actually saying, what they're really saying is, oh, geez, if we charged, there would have to be a standard. There would have to be a minimum expectation of performance. And maybe I, A, may not be able to measure up to it, and B, I wouldn't be having fun anymore.
Well, and to that point, let's face it, Thomas, people respect what you're doing more when they have to pay for it. It's true.
That's right.
And
they'll want to know.
True.
Like the plumber or the electrician. Why are you qualified? How do I know? And you're not going to have that unless you have an association that has certain standards and guidelines. And the only way that's going to be brought about is through public pressure. And the only way that you're going to get public pressure is to charge for investigations.
Right. And yeah, and what's wrong with requiring at least a minimal certification? I know that people are like, oh no. Like, I don't like to see groups that want to go in and charge people when they don't know what they're doing. But it's different if you've had to pay for some sort of education and licensing. Well, let's face it, I've spent, I don't know, $8,000 on my equipment over the past 10 years. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge investment.
And look at what's happening today. One of the things the plumbers did was that, of course, they put a lot of these paranormal sites on the map, these paranormal actively sites, but now also they all charge.
Yep. They charge big dollars, too, big money.
Yeah. So, why not charge for investigations? But here's the thing. Now, here's where the science comes in. All right? One of the things that a plumber has to do to get his or her license, for example, is to know how to sweat a pipe when they're soldering it together, to know that they're supposed to use acid core solder and acid flux instead of rosin core, and why, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Electricians, same thing. You have to demonstrate you can wire a three-way switch or a traveler switch. And so there become standards, but those standards are based on hard science. They're based on electronics. They're based on chemistry. What do you base it for in the paranormal? What do you base it on? Opinion, notions, that I've recorded. There's a couple out there that makes a big name in the field because they're experts at EVPs because they seem to record so many more than everybody else, and that's their only claim to fame. So what? What does that tell you? What does that mean? By what standard can they do it? And is their particular standard replicable?
Right.
And other people replicate it.
Yeah, and we can't have a standard like, okay, you can go in with your camera and only if you can capture an apparition, you're licensed. It's just not going to happen every time. I've seen I have a very interesting picture that I believe to be an apparition. It's the coolest thing I've ever caught, but not everyone has that, and I may never get anything like that again. So it's very hard to replicate some of these things.
Yes, and the other thing we're dealing with now, Jodi, of course, with this fad, this fascination with it, and with modern technology, and you've run into it before. You've run into evidence that you've seen that you say this isn't real.
Oh, sure, all the time.
Yeah, you see fake evidence. Fake evidence. People are pressured to come up with something. And so even in so Jodi, even in that particular area, like that you're not accredited unless you can get results, even that's not an acceptable standard.
No.
It has to be the processes and the procedures, and they have to be based on science.
It would have to be that. It would have to be how you go about doing it, what paperwork you have to use, having a proper license, being sure that maybe these 10 pieces of equipment are standard, that these 6 pieces that everyone must know how to use, and you have to prove that you know how to use them.
Now, let me toss another thing out at you that is related to the same subject of discussion. And I've got some experience with this because many of these radio hosts are themselves paranormal investigators.
Sure.
And I've asked them the questions. I ask them 2 questions. Number 1, without looking it up on your computer or your smartphone on the internet, tell me the scientific method. Tell me the steps of the scientific method. Number 2, tell me how you set up a scientifically meaningful and credible lab conditions out in the field, like in a house. How do you do it?
Right.
And I haven't talked to one yet that can answer. Well, one. that can answer both of those questions. So where do you start?
Well, it depends upon the location. And the truth is that to what you're saying, I mean, I can totally give you answers for that, and I know Jason can as well because we've both been doing this for quite some time. But, you know, we do different setups at different locations. To what you're saying, it's not always a standard. And, you know, in a smaller,
right.
in a house setting, I'm probably not going to set up a DVR with 6 cameras. But, you know, if you take me out to the Ripavilla plantation in Tennessee, I'm going to, because such
right.
a larger location and different. So you're right.
There's
not.
Say, in order to establish a standard that is based on something that is acceptable and credible, that standard has to be scientific. And in order to set a scientific standard, investigators need to demonstrate that they understand the scientific method and how to set up a scientifically credible experimental environment out in the field. Just like a plumber has to know what's the chemical composition of the materials that he or she is working with in order to be able to plumb. So, you know, these are the challenges that this field faces.
It's a huge challenge. It's huge. You're so, I mean, God, and I hate to say this too. I'll probably get in trouble, but so many people who have jumped into this field have done it with zero education, or they're, without a more delicate way to put it, they're people who were not very well educated people to begin with. And that does make it tough.
In other words, last week I couldn't even spell paranormal. Now I are one.
Yep. Now you are gonna get some stuff to do that. Yes, exactly. And I'm not knocking anybody. I love it when anybody wants to learn anything. I really, really do. But you know, it doesn't have to be so expensive. You know, we're not talking about, you know, getting a master's degree for 8 years. But
correct. Yes. You don't have to be, you know.
There he is.
You don't have Jason.
I'm here. Can I say something? Allow me to say something. In order to set a standard in a paranormal setting, you have to accept the fact that every entity out there is the same. That is not accurate at all. You would not go to a rap concert wearing an Anthrax or a Metallica T-shirt. You're not going to get any results that way. Right. So in order to go into an environment and get the results that you need, whether if it's EVP, EMF meters going off, or have an entity playing with the flashlight, you have to know the entity that's in there. You have to encourage them to come out and hang out with you and play with you. You're not going to do that by setting some kind of professional standard in order to do that. No, you have to become their friend. I've said this hundreds of times. It's like picking up a chick in the bar. It's rather you have a chemistry when you first meet and talk, or you don't. And if you don't, they're just going to get up and walk away. It's the same thing. You're dealing with, the theory is, human spirits. They're going to have the same sort of scenario. If they look at you and say he's an asshole, he's going to get up and walk out. He's not going to play with you. He's not going to want to hang out with you. And it's the same. You got to bring in your own personality. You have to, you know, say, hey, I'm a cool dude, man. You want to play some cards? You want to chat? You want to talk about some bitches? Let's do it.
That's true. Well, I mean, then that's what I was saying, that every situation is different as far as what our setup would be and what we would do when we went there. It is always different. And, yeah, you never know what's going to happen. But I think that the new investigators there could be guidelines for them learning how to at least use equipment prior to going in somewhere. I think
equipment use is wrong, in my honest opinion. I mean, as I stated before, it's not the equipment, it's your personality that's going to attract the entity. The equipment should only be there to document, and that's it. That's all it's going to be for. You're not going to find a ghost with an EMF meter. You're not going to find a ghost with Down syndrome. You're not going to find a ghost with anything. Your particular personality, your energy, is what's going to attract a ghost, is what's going to find the ghost. Use the equipment to document it. And then from there, you got to compile that evidence and figure out exactly what the hell it is. personally, I'm tired of seeing ghost pictures. I'm tired of hearing EVPs. That doesn't mean a fucking thing to me anymore. It doesn't. And it's because, let's just face it, there's more pictures out there of ghosts than there is of Bigfoot. It's true. and what I want to know is, what is that ghost? What is it really made up of? That's what I want to know. I don't want to know that there's a ghost in the picture. I want to know what it is, what it's doing, why is it there? Is it really electromagnetic energy, or is it something else? Is it really a residual energy? Because that's another thing. People take a picture or they hear something. Oh, that's got to be a residual energy. How do you know? Because you only hear it one specific time? Maybe that's the only time it wants to come out and play. Maybe that's the only time that it feels like it's comfortable to come out. I'm tired of hearing all this stuff without any evidence to suggest it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Jason, I know you're coming in late on the interview. What I was talking about was, as a theorist, from a physics or cosmological point of view, my objective is not to determine whether there's a ghost in a certain location or not. From my point of view, I believe that the body of paranormal evidence is sufficiently weighty to demonstrate that these kinds of events do occur. So whether we detect 10,000, in other words, the accumulation of evidence at this point in time, to me, is just simply accumulating more evidence. It doesn't do anything. My goal, my understanding is that paranormal phenomena can tell us something about the way that physical reality is put together. And that's what I'm concerned about. I want
and I can relate with that.
To crack the physical secrets of it.
Yeah. I can totally relate with that. In all honesty, I've always said, in order to understand paranormal phenomena, you have to understand the human mind. You have to understand, the physical realm before we can figure out what's going on, what we can't see.
Well, we do have certain physical effects that, to me, don't necessarily need an understanding of the human mind. And again, I'm speaking from it from a physics point of view. So that when we get a heat signature where one should not be, or a cold spot where there are no visible physical causes that would affect that, or the emergence of an electromagnetic field, these are physical things. They're not necessarily dependent upon the human mind, because we have technology that can actually record them and measure them. And so that's what I'm interested in. That's my end of the field, so to speak. That I believe that we need to study these things in a uniform way, number one, so that we can get to the science of it. And number two, so we can set a standard for this field that the general public will accept. And that standard doesn't have to do with how many ghosts you saw and what pictures you took or what recordings you have. It's got to be a scientifically standard that people would say, oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. And right now the standard in the field is, as long as an investigative team goes in and mimics what is seen on TV, then they're accepted as being, genuine and qualified. And so that was what the discussion was about. More, like I said, when we look at, if we think about it in terms of police forces investigating a crime scene, for example, we've got criminology and we have forensics. And it's unfortunate that the paranormal field has been about 99.99% criminology and almost no forensics. We need to understand the science and the mechanics of the phenomena themselves. And I think the other questions about whether you're talking to dead Aunt Mary or how many dead Aunt Marys you can actually talk to is another part of the field. So I'm talking about a part of the field that's been sorely neglected and has something very fundamental to do, not only with the future of the field, but with the future of humanity itself.
Yeah. I agree. There's a lot of the field that we definitely do need to venture off, just not on the investigative side with paranormal. Well, the average ghost hunter is the best way to put it. I do think we need to start connecting the dots with other genres of paranormal phenomena. I strongly agree with that. And would I like to see some kind of pattern or some kind of standard that could be set to connect those dots? Absolutely. But I'm hoping that we do start to figure that out. But I think it's a long wait before that happens.
Yeah, and this is why what I tell people is what I talk about is the reason why I'm never invited to Paracons. Because what I talk about is buzz killing. It's like I'm the guy that got on the roller coaster, and while everybody else is screaming and yelling and thrills, I'm holding up the technical manual explaining to people how the roller coaster works. And nobody wants to hear that while they're riding. I do get invited to other kinds of talks and events, but Paracons I've never been invited to because, by and large, what I talk about doesn't sell tickets.
Yeah. Excellent. I think it is now actually top of the hour, which I hate missing half of the show because let's just face it, I don't know what the hell it's talked about or how it's talked about. But,
it's been a good talk.
You'll have to listen to the archive also.
I will. I've never listened to my own show, though.
Really?
But
I do. Sometimes I listen to the replays. Not always. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes I do.
Jodi, why don't you do the dumbass trivia question for tonight?
Yeah, and I did announce at the beginning of the show that we were starting a new thing called Dumbass Trivia. So, our first Dumbass Trivia question of the night is, what was Rupert Sheldrake trying to prove in his study? Who was paying attention? Who was paying attention? Do they have to call in for that?
They do have to call in.
What's the number, Jason?
They have to call in. Be the first one to call in with that answer. The number is 1-607-349-0410. Be the first one to call in, and you can win. I'll give you a choice, actually, tonight because I'm a nice guy. You can rather win a Ghost Chat Radio mug, coffee mug, which is a fabulous. Jodi doesn't even have one yet, so.
I want one.
Or I will be more than happy to send out a autographed copy of my first book, Unrested Peace.
Ooh, it's very sexy. Pick that. I recommend picking that. So, again, the question was, what was Rupert Sheldrake trying to prove in his study that we talked about earlier?
Yep. The number is 607-349-0410. Well, as I said, be the first to call in and answer that question, and you get one of the two choices of, prizes. So get on it, everyone. Get on it. In the meantime, let's continue with the show.
Well, we haven't really let Thomas talk about his book because we got off, we talked about all sorts of, our weird news stories, and that brought up other things. So, you know how we just sort of freeball it here. So we should probably have Thomas tell everybody a little bit more about his book and what he talks about there also.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing to ask Tom. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's kind of lead into it on the theme that I spoke about just a few minutes ago about the forensics as opposed to criminology. The criminology is involved with who done it, why they did it, what's their motivation, why were they in that particular place, why did they choose that victim, why did they choose that time of day or night to commit the crime, why did they choose, a particular tool or means to do it. That's all criminology. But, let's say if police come up to a murder scene or something like that where somebody's been shot by a gun, the forensics examiner is interested in, well, what type of gun was used? Or was it a gun? What are the ballistics? What's the blood splatter? Where was the victim standing? Where was the perpetrator standing? The actual physics of the scene itself. And this is the area where, the paranormal field has been, for lack of a better word, just been crippled. There really isn't very much good research in that area at all. For example, people go into haunted sites with EMF meters, and they say, oh, we pick up this certain field, and so this indicates there might be a ghost there. I'm a forensicist. I want to know why in the world an electromagnetic field is emerging from thin air in an abandoned house with no electric turned on. That's what I want to know, because the practical end of it is that maybe it will help us generate free, limitless energy. If we understood.
Isn't that a question on what paranormal enthusiasts are doing?
Well, I'm sorry.
Are you basing that particular question on paranormal enthusiasts?
No.
EMF readings throughout a building?
Well, I'm basing it, in part, yes, on that. I mean, this is what I understand that a lot of investigators do. So, for example, I'm assuming, and I think correctly, that this is what investigators are doing with EMF meters for several reasons. Number one, they are generally using a caliber of equipment that cannot be calibrated in the field.
Well,
even if they knew how to calibrate them.
The EMF meters that a typical investigator uses, such as myself or anyone else, I guess you can say, the K2 meters, millimeters, so forth and so on, they just don't pick up EMF. They also pick up radio frequencies, microwaves, so forth and so on. So to get a spike in an abandoned building, it could be a police going by, it could be from an ambulance going by, so forth and so on. As long as they're on the radio or playing with their little computers that they have inside of their vehicles, you can get a sporadic spike here and there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's my understanding that also there are times when the emergence of an EMF field is genuinely associated with the emergence of a paranormal effect.
Absolutely. Sometimes it is. As an investigator, I don't go by those sporadic ones. I like consistency. And I'm sure you as a scientist will agree. Consistency is the key of trying to come up with any kind of solidifiable evidence, no matter what the case is. And yes, if I can get, answer and question responses, or if I can get, like sometimes I'll put down multiple devices on the floor, such as a flashlight and a millimeter and a run pod or something like that, and I'll point to a specific device and I'll say, can you make this one work? And it'll do it and so forth and so on. That's what I like. I like the consistency.
I understand that. What I'm saying is that my question is, what forms that electromagnetic field?
Yeah.
It's a physical effect. It's measurable and observable, therefore it's physical, and therefore it must conform to the laws and principles of the physical universe in which it occurs. So and this is what I'm saying when it comes to asking the question, what are the physical mechanics that actually produce this kind of an electromagnetic field associated with a paranormal effect? That, the paranormal community is like, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's the part of the field where the paranormal community is basically bankrupt.
Neglecting. They're neglecting.
It's not just that. They don't even attempt that. They don't feel that it's even a part of what's necessary.
Well, so a lot of them, a lot of them tend to get it in their head that they already know what they're looking for and they already have all the answers figured out. So they tend to not hear other sides of what it could be. And I've always said, we have no idea what we are looking at or what it is. And I'm sure you can agree with me on that. It could be dead people. It could be time travelers. It could be, parallel universes, which goes into more physics and so forth and so on. We don't know. I don't know.
But what can we say for certain about it?
We do know there's something weird out there. That's all we know.
We can't say for certain. We just can't. It's different every time.
I think from a scientific perspective, there is something that we can say with absolute certainty. And this is where, in talking this way, some of my work is going to unfold here. What we are talking about, if we were going to speak of it in scientific terminology, we are talking about the materialization of information. And now, when you look at it that way, it begins to take on that forensics type of perspective, that scientific perspective. What we can say for certain, and it's like I said, if we're talking about a criminal investigation, the forensics guy can narrow down to exactly the weapon that was used. The criminologist has to figure out who's pulling the trigger and why. And so that's why I say the paranormal has been basically centered around the criminology. Okay, so Dead Aunt Mary is doing this, and that. No. How is Dead Aunt Mary or an alien or whatever able to cause the effects that are observable and measurable that must conform to the laws of physics because they are being observed and measured within the confines of physical space-time? And that's where the field has been completely bankrupt and void, and that very few people even see the need for that. And that's what I'm arguing for, that there's a definite need, that the answers to those ultimately will be far more valuable to humanity than how many gook and spook sightings somebody can come up with.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I don't get invited to Paracons. So, what are we talking about? The first thing is, it's like you said, Jason, many things can produce a paranormal or an electromagnetic field. So what's the first thing that we have to do to scientifically test that? We also need to bring with ourselves an oscilloscope so we can determine what types of electromagnetic fields would be impossible to occur in the normal background local conditions. And then when we record a field like that, now we can say that field is truly paranormal because there is no normal way that particular frequency of field could have been produced in local space. See what I mean?
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that my work involves. Now, what I've done, using paranormal phenomena as a single body of evidence, coupled with other bodies of evidence that come from the world of quantum mechanics, standard physics, astrophysics, also, is a model of reality that not only gives us a consistent set of mechanics for paranormal phenomena, but also answers some of the other pressing mysteries that are facing science and physics today. And that's my theory of supergeometrics. That's what my book is about.
Okay, excellent. We do have a caller in. Hopefully he's going to answer the dumbass trivia question, which would be great.
Christopher, do you know what the question is?
Repeat it. I was too involved in laughing in the chat.
Okay, earlier I was going over weird news stories Were you listening when we went over those?
Yes.
Okay, well, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake tested a concept with a group of volunteers. So what was the study that he was testing? Do you know?
No.
All right. Let me ask him a different. Should I ask him a different one, Jason?
Yeah, I'm not.
Is that going to be fair, though, Jodi?
What?
Is that going to be fair, though? Ask another question, considering that
Not
we do
really.
have.
I mean, someone else could still call in. Someone else could still call in. So.
Someone else could still call in. Yeah.
We still have time. So.
I'm not that familiar with the mechanics of a spill since I've never been an investigator and stuff. So sometimes I get a little bit stuck.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good.
It's nice to meet all of you, too. First time I think I chatted with everybody.
Yeah. How's it going out there in PA, Chris?
I wish the weather was warmer at night. It's like 50 degrees.
Ooh.
That is good. Same here.
Mm-hmm.
You have any
you
have any questions you want to ask the guest, Chris?
Yeah, I was listening to the things about physics and stuff. I wonder if we're interdimensional beings, just like those aliens are.
Well, it's a good question, and unfortunately, one of the things that we would have to determine to answer that question is what is actually meant by interdimensional. We get a lot of terminology that's thrown around in the alternative communities, so to speak, outside the mainstream. And a lot of those terms really don't have a clear meaning to them that's scientifically relevant. So if we talk about interdimensional, we're talking about literally between one dimension and another.
Yes.
Well, the physical universe is defined by 4 variant dimensions: height, width, length, and time. How would we define another dimension? And how would that dimension be able to support or sustain something that could materialize into our normal dimensions physically?
I don't know if it's possible that they could be materialized in a physical form. I've often wondered that question myself. I do know that there are a lot of top-grade physicists out there now that are researching and studying, parallel universes, other dimensions, forth and so on. And they now have this big-ass machine, I guess you can say, and they're shooting particles through the space.
The Large Hadron Collider, the LHC.
Yeah.
Yes.
The only problem is these physicists don't exactly know what's happening after they cross that particular thing.
Well, what is more happening is that sometimes they don't have an explanation for what they're witnessing. They're very good at determining what it is that they're actually seeing, but they don't always have an explanation for what it is that they're seeing and measuring.
Yeah.
Something like paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, basically the same kind of research that we're doing as ghost hunters, I guess you can say. We have the answer, we just don't know the question.
That's very true indeed.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So really, we would have to have enough of a theoretical framework to frame the conditions that would describe quote-unquote interdimensional before we...
I'm reading about the holographic universe. I'm finding that interesting. It's a rather complex theory.
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's a derivative of David Bohm's work.
Yeah, it also doesn't violate the Heisenberg uncertainty principle either.
Even though quantum computing does.
Yes, it does. Because in quantum computing, the electrons change their structures, how they're created, and it's not supposed to be that way.
Well, the goal with quantum computing is that in order to make it work, we have to be able to predict the outcome of a quantum process with 100% probability. And the Heisenberg principle says that that's impossible.
Yes, that's true.
And yet we're able to do it by measuring the electrical potential at the outside edge of the quantum process. But we're actually getting off the point now. We're way off the subject of the theme of the show. We'd like to be calling Zach Fagan and start talking to him about construction.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have input.
Yeah, lately I've been trying to learn all aspects of this stuff, and as a beginner, I'm like wowed and floored.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, hopefully we can cover some more ground on this tonight.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I would like to listen in and learn more.
Well, here we go then.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go back to listening.
All right. Thanks for calling in, Chris.
Have a great day. Bye, guys.
Bye. In case anyone forgot the dumbass trivia question, Jodi, why don't you repeat it again?
Okay. The dumbass trivia question is, of course, I just closed up that story. I think we should ask a different one now.
A different dumbass?
Hang on. Okay, here it is. Sorry. I'm looking around at something else. I'm looking around at, okay, what was Rupert Sheldrake trying to prove in his study that we covered in Weird News? And
Weird News.
And it wasn't the first story either, so it's not like you missed it right at the beginning of the show. That was like, the second or third story. But, yeah, he was conducting a study. What was the study about? What was he trying to prove?
Excellent. And the call-in number is 607-349-0410. Be the first to call in with that answer, and you can win cool prizes. You'll get a choice tonight. You can get a nice, cool Ghost Chat Radio coffee mug, which you can, enjoy that free, obviously, or you can get a autographed book of Unrest in Peace. So be the first to call in, and you'll definitely get that.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right, we can continue.
Well, let me talk a little bit more about my work, because it is sometimes, it's so different that sometimes it's difficult actually to formulate, a line of questioning unless you're kind of already familiar with it. So what I'm talking about is this, try to make a long story short. What we see, in my opinion, with paranormal phenomena is two different levels of events. And this is looking at it from a physics perspective. And again, not criminology. We're not talking about who pulled the trigger, whether it's Dead Aunt Mary or demons or, interdimensional aliens or whatever. Put all them guys in the side room. Put them off in the soundproof room somewhere. We're talking about the mechanics, the physics of it. I believe that we have two different levels of events. We have what I call secondary paranormal events. And that is the actual changes that are occurring in the local environment. Those are all secondary. Things like electromagnetic fields, cold spots, heat signatures, feelings of heaviness, mystery breezes, all these kinds of things are all secondary effects. They are part of the local environmental changes that bring about the conditions necessary for the primary paranormal effect which is the materialization of information. So, for example, EVPs are organized patterns of information. They are something that is being conveyed and carried and transmitted by local conditions. So, for example, if we were going to, send out a radio transmission, we have the information, but that information is riding on an electromagnetic compression wave in the form of modulations to that wave. So the information and the wave, although they combine together, are actually two different elements. So in paranormal phenomena, let's talk about information a little bit, and let's talk about an apparition and see how this could illustrate this.
Okay.
Let's say we have an investigation where a team goes into a home and the current residents are complaining. They're saying, we got all this odd stuff going on, but we keep seeing from time to time this woman. And this woman walks from this room to that room, and we see her here and we see her there. And sometimes we see her so clearly that we can actually recognize her features, see the kind of dress she's wearing and what she actually looks like. So the team goes to work. They start doing their homework. And one of the members goes to the local library and starts looking up old records and maybe looking at microfiche, images of old newspapers. And they come up with a picture of a woman who maybe died in the house 100 years ago. And they bring the photo in and they show it to the residents and say, does this look familiar? And their jaws drop, their faces turn white. They say, oh my, that's the woman we've been seeing. It looks just like her. We recognize her instantly. And it's not a no BS thing where people are just saying what they think you want to hear. These people are actually genuinely moved by the image you just showed them. Well, what is that photograph from a scientific point of view? That photograph is a recording of a collection of coherent, organized information from the exterior geometry of that individual who lived 100 years ago. That information was conveyed via modulations on a light wave that traveled through a camera lens and was recorded on a film. And now, 100 years later, we're taking this information print and showing it to these people. And they're saying that's her, which means what they're seeing materializing in local space-time, both in local space, in the vicinity, in the geographical area, and in time, our time, not 100 years ago. It's the exact same collection of information that's materializing 100 years later, or 110 years later, or how many years. So when we look at it that way, it opens up a whole new area of thought that, for the most part, has been completely absent in the paranormal field, paranormal community. So where is this information coming from? We know where it came from in the photograph. It came from the physical individual, that person's body. That's what conveyed the information. Now, that body's gone. It's dead. It's rotted away in the ground. And yet there's a source of information that is able to materialize today. Now, if we study the physics of it, many of the traditional ideas in the paranormal field just don't match up. They don't measure up. People will say, well, this woman is walking through the same hallway all the time, must be a residual haunt. And okay, those things happen. But then they'll say, oh, it's recorded somehow on the background. How? Where? What material? No answer. Nobody ever thinks about it that far other than notions and speculation. You know, you would have to think about this for a moment. And this is the scientific way. And when you look at it this way, it just completely blows away traditional ideas. And again, when I'm explaining this, I am not questioning that the events occur. I accept the body of paranormal evidence as legitimate. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at this. All right? Let's take a look at space-time itself. There is no way that we know that space-time itself can record information. It has to have a space-time compatible medium, which would be like an electromagnetic field that has frequency and amplitude, temporal and spatial dimensioning, woven into the fabric of space-time itself that can carry a modulated signal. That would be the carrier of information. That is not possible in drywall. That's not possible in a wooden floor. Just simply is not there. And even if it were, let's say by some bizarre unknown means that the plaster and lathe on the walls can record this in some way from the past event, be able to store it for 100 years in some sort of recordable medium, and then not only play it back, but play it back in perfect fidelity and project it back into the original geometric location that it occurred. And if the woman is walking, it's actually acting like a movie projector, playing it in that very same sequence of events with perfect fidelity, both in geographic or geometric location, in the geometry of the image itself, and in the fidelity of its movement. Now, somebody name me a physical material that can do that in a haunted house.
I don't think there is a physical thing that can do
Yeah,
that.
I don't know.
No. And see, this is the kind of question that isn't asked, because being recorded on the background is titillating. It's exciting. It's mysterious. It's woo-woo. You know, it sells books. It sells Paracon tickets. It sells TV shows.
Sure.
And it makes it sound like somebody actually knows what they're talking about, when in fact they have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah. So we have to look for a different medium. We have to look for something that can record and store information and be able to play it back on demand.
Right.
Let's take another, populist idea in the paranormal field that has no foundation in science whatsoever and cannot be scientifically argued in any way. The idea that, let's say, when people feel a cold spot or a draining of their batteries in their device, that the spirit, here we go, everything is always criminology-centric, the spirit's the connective tissue, the spirit's the cause of everything. You know, like the criminal just put a hole in the person's head without a gun in his hand. You know, everything's the criminal. That somehow the spirit is drawing energy from the local environment in order to physically manifest. Well, forget for a moment the idea that suddenly when you die, you acquire the ability to convert mass to energy and energy to mass. Forget about that for a moment. But the problem is that the physics for that isn't there. If you were to draw, let's put it this way, they base it on Einstein's formula loosely of mass energy equivalence, E equals mc squared. Well, mass can be converted to energy, and energy can be converted to mass, so that's what must be happening. Well, they have ignored the formula itself. They've just taken the idea from it. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. E equals mc squared. Speed of light being the only constant in the universe from which everything else can be measured relative to in an absolute way. That's an incredibly huge number. It's an unimaginably large number. If you took and this is something that folks that you can look up online, check this out. If you took the entire energy output of the sun and think about the Earth and how tiny it is compared to the sun and how little energy is here compared to what's being generated from the sun. If you took the entire energy output of the sun, it is insufficient to convert to 1 ounce of matter. Most people in the paranormal field that talk about, spirits are draining energy to physically manifest aren't even aware of this fact, and it's a fact, So you wouldn't be talking about a cold spot of 20 to 30 degrees, maybe 2 or 3 foot wide. You'd be talking about how many square miles that just froze solid to absolute zero, 273 degrees centigrade, where all molecular activity ceases, just to create a wispy, kind of a cigarette smoky kind of manifestation for maybe a fraction of a second. Physically not there. Now, let's talk about draining batteries. This is a known phenomenon that certain frequencies of electromagnetic fields can interfere with electromagnetic equipment. This is a known phenomenon. In fact, there's weapons that are built based on this principle. If we jump over to another alternate field, which is the UFO field, this same phenomenon is sometimes reported that in a close proximity to a UFO sighting, suddenly the cars stop, the batteries drain, they look dead, the radio doesn't work, the lights don't work. It's the exact same phenomenon. But could you find a single person in the UFO community that would tell you that the UFO is draining your Evereadys from your flashlight to physically manifest? Of course not.
I haven't heard that.
And why not? Because they don't have a ghost stuck in their head. Where in the paranormal side, it's almost comical. Here they've got an electromagnetic meter that is going off the scale, and their electrical equipment is malfunctioning. And because they got a ghost stuck in their head, they can't see what's happening right in front of their eyes. They're completely blind to it. And the evidence is in the vast majority of cases, unless the device is damaged, as soon as you remove that device from the vicinity of the emerging event, it returns to normal. So, I'm not saying that these events don't occur. I'm just saying that the traditional explanations for them are completely groundless.
Well, one thing I noticed with the battery draining with paranormal phenomena with ghosts, it's mostly in their cameras. The batteries go dead. Camera batteries don't last that long anyway. So personally, I think they're exaggerating as far as how long they lasted for and so forth and so on. I think that solidifies most of it, but you hardly ever hear about a K2 meter battery going dead or, something like that. It's mostly just camera equipment, and I mean, let's just face it, camera batteries don't last that period. Don't last that long.
I've had it happen, though, Jay, on digital recorders where I swear to you, just bought brand new batteries and put them in right before we went out to do the investigation that night. And, an hour into it, we set up, we just start, moving around, and my recorder died. I've had that happen, not every time, but I've had it happen a few times.
Yeah, it doesn't happen as often as what people make it out.
No, I agree with that. It doesn't. And, I don't usually have that happen with my camera, but that was kind of weird when it happened with the digital recorder. I definitely thought it was strange, and, of course, I always have extra batteries in my pockets just in case. But, no, it certainly doesn't happen every time. It has only happened to me a few times, but, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, this kind of a scientific window into this phenomenon gives us additional ideas where the traditional thoughts are almost like a dogma that binds people in some sort of a mental or logical prison cell where they can't reason their way out of it because they've got certain definitions that they accept absolutely, and that excludes what may actually be happening. If we had the addition of an oscilloscope, this model would predict that we would see a certain wavelength in association with malfunctioning of battery-powered electrical equipment. You know, and I bet you, you know, a good steak dinner somewhere that when those experiments would be conducted, that's what would be observed. And then we would know that the spirit is not draining your batteries in order to physically manifest, that you don't sit there and yell, "Take my energy so you can appear." You know, you know, it's like the flipping dark ages, man. You know, to me it is.
What I find even more funny about that is you're absolutely right. People do that in fucking buildings, and I laugh at it.
Jay, you do it every time. Every time. No, I'm just kidding.
You never see the manifestation of an entity after something dies. You don't do it. Why?
No.
You know what I mean?
Now, Now, what about the cold spots?
Well, I remember you were discussing earlier about making fun of contractors and so forth and so on, and, well, not making fun, but joking around. I happen to be a contractor. I know what can cause a cold spot in the house. So, I mean, a lot of the issue that comes in is most of the corners of your houses and your windows, they're not insulated. None of them are ever insulated 100% guaranteed because the area that you have to insulate is so small. So, I mean, to pack insulation in there, you always wind up losing the R value of whatever insulation it is. Exterior walls, you have to use R21. Interior walls are R19. So you lose the R value of the insulation whenever you pack them in the corners and around the windows. You're going to wind up getting air coming through there. It's going to happen. So, I mean, at times it can be just a little, 1-inch circular amount of air coming through that area, and you wind up feeling a cold spot in the center of a room. It happens. Mm-hmm. I can't deny that it doesn't happen. Sometimes you get cold spots if your plumbing isn't insulated right. The pipes, they wind up sweating. Condensation gets brought up. That condensation can turn into a mist. People wind up getting mists in their pictures. There's a good chance that's probably why, but you can also get a cold spot that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or there are instances, apparently, where they are genuine paranormal effects.
Absolutely, I don't deny that. But until you
so that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the misidentified data. I'm talking about the data that actually is quote unquote paranormal.
Yeah.
Gosh, I know we don't have that much longer, so I'm just going to kind of jump into this real quick.
Yeah.
And give the crux of what my theory is. Essentially, if we talk about the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang began, and there's more and more evidence that shows that this event actually did happen. The Big Bang began as a quantum singularity that's described as infinitely dense and infinitely small. Because it's a singularity, in other words, it's not a multiplicity. There are no dimensional variants in it. And because it has a value of infinity, it is not physical. It lies outside of anything that we would describe as space and time. And yet, the physical universe emerged from it and materialized, and there was a collection of information that came along with it. So that everywhere in the early universe, the primordial particles in that soup began to conform themselves to the exact same laws of physics that we know today. In other words, there wasn't a parent electron that after trial and error the electron finally formed, and then all other electrons are offspring of that original one. It's that electrons began to form to a very rigid, constraining process everywhere in the early universe at the same time. Now, according to the conventional thinking in physics, that the quantum singularity disappeared into the physical universe. My theory states that the quantum singularity is still there, and the physical universe is still emerging from it. And that paranormal phenomena is a demonstration of that same mechanism occurring in real time. That we have the physical manifestation, the materialization, in other words, literally made material, the materialization of information that's coming from outside of space-time. Now, if this theory is correct, and again, this has to do with science. People talk about theories all the time. Your audience has probably heard of thousands of theories. But what they haven't been taught was that the true definition, part of the true definition of a theory is that it's experimentally testable. If it's not experimentally testable, it's not a scientific theory. At best, it's a scientific hypothesis.
Well, it's got to have evidence to suggest it, something to suggest that happens.
Well, that's a hypothesis. A theory is a strong enough model that it predicts certain aspects of reality that could be experimentally testable.
Yeah.
So, for example, back in the 60s, there was a number of physicists who predicted, based on a theoretical work, that there was a particle that would impart mass to other particles. The most prominent of was a physicist named Peter Higgs. And
I've
so
heard
the
of
hypothetical particle became known as the Higgs boson. Well, they discovered something that substantially mirrors that prediction. Not completely, but that's another point of conversation. And when they announced that they had, on July 4th of last year, that they had discovered what was predicted by the Higgs model, Peter Higgs, who was present at the announcement, broke down and openly wept. This is a theorist's dream. This is what they live and die for, is to have their theories experimentally tested.
Yeah.
So, most of what you hear is speculation, notions. It's not theory. Hypothesis at best. And again, one who is familiar with the scientific method knows this. So, let's say my theory is right, that we are going to see the manifestations that we saw or that we are able to measure at the beginning of the universe happening in miniature at a paranormally active site. Well, the first thing that happened, I'm sorry.
Don't we have scientists that are working on that? They're colliding, again, different types of particles into one another. And making it so they're also creating little black holes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the exception of a rare few, including myself, all the scientists who were, who could have possibly experimented with paranormal phenomena have ran towards the door like they're in a nightclub on fire.
Yeah.
They've just vacated the premises. But let's say at this height.
Is it because they can't get the funding, or they just can't prove the value of it?
Oh yeah, I'm going to apply to the U.S. government for a grant to do this and this, but I'm into gooks and spooks. Oh yeah, that'll fly. Plus the fact that the paranormal community, by and large, is from a scientist's point of view, is a mockery. It's a comedy. You know, it really is. It's laughable, and I've just given just a couple of many examples tonight of why a scientist just shakes his head and it says you guys are clueless, man. You don't have a clue.
It's a shame.
So, yeah, it is a shame. So I'm going to try to rattle this off real quickly. And this is interesting that if you asked any physicist that was versed in Einsteinian theory, and if you ask them what the effects would be of a mouth of an Einstein-Rosen bridge expanding in local space with physical content surrounding it in a house, what the effects would be, and without even knowing they would do it, they would start listing you all the things that we observe at Paranormal Actively sites. You get an expansion of local space-time. The first thing that, and we know that would happen, is that it crushes the space on the outside of the bubble, or that opening that would be expanding. The electrons of the atoms inside the molecules get excited by that crushing, and they leap up into their higher orbits around the nucleus. As they fall back down, they can expend two things. They can emit heat. In fact, all electromagnetic fields release heat, but they can also release photons.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if you had a sphere of swelling space-time jacketed in an electromagnetic field and emitting photons. I say this is the world's first scientific model of what paranormal investigators call a luminous orb. It would fit it exactly. Okay. Forget that 99% of them are dust particles. I'm not talking about that. That's a different conversation. Right. You know, all we have to do is entire human history is to observe one rock falling from the sky to know that there is such a thing as meteorites.
Yeah.
We only need one. So another thing that would happen, we were talking about the cold spots. This expanding space-time bubble until the laws of equilibrium would cause the air molecules outside of the bubble to ride over that ridge of space-time and fill the gap in between or in the middle. We would have a temporary period or a situation where there was a lowering of barometric pressure inside the bubble. Now, we know that heat is not contained in space. Heat is contained in air molecules. So when you have an area within this bubble that has a lower density of air molecules than there is on the outside, you're going to have a drop in temperature. You're going to have a cold spot. An expanding space-time bubble would also generate its own gravitational field. This part of the prediction has also been experimentally demonstrated, the emergence of an independent gravitational field within local space at the emergence of a paranormal event.
Yeah.
That's a prediction of my theory that's already been verified. And I say that this is what accounts for feelings of heaviness. They're literally true because additional gravity is being inserted into the local space. And so on and so forth. This theory explains every primary and secondary paranormal effects, why EVPs could be recorded in a vacuum, why they can't be heard audibly, how the very fabric of space-time can act like a speaker to cause the effect of a disembodied voice, because the very surface of space-time, which is a substantive field, acts like a set of vocal cords, and so on and so forth. And that's what supergeometrics is about.
Excellent. We are running out of time. I do want to make sure that all your information gets out there where people can contact you in case they have any further questions, so forth and so on. So I'll let you take it from there.
Everything about the book and where to order it and how to contact me and related articles and where I'll be appearing next is all at www.cosmicveil.com, and that's spelled V-E-I-L. It's one word. And in October, I'll be appearing at the International Paradigm Symposium, the lecture, October 2nd through 5th, up in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And, well, you don't have to listen to that British bitch. We still got time. And considering I didn't open the show, I would feel completely asinine if I closed it. So, Jodi, I will let you take it from here.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. If you want to find any more information or connect with me online, you can find me at Pinterest, Twitter, everywhere, Tumblr, Instagram, and on Facebook at Johaunts, JOHAUNTS, or under my radio show page, which is Jodi Johann Smith. You can also find Jason and myself on the Ghost Chat Radio fan page on Facebook, so be sure and check that out. And you can find my fabulous host, Jason Stanton, on Facebook under Jason Stanton as well.
You did excellent. And considering nobody participated in the Dumbass Trivia for tonight, we will try it again next week.
Damn it.
We'll shoot for Tuesday nights. That's okay. We'll get it next week. Tuesday nights we're going to be doing Dumbass Trivia. So everyone be sure to continue to listen in. I'm right here on DTM Wicked Radio. Tuesday night on Ghost Chat Radio, we will be doing another Dumbass Trivia. We can also be found Monday nights, too, from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to mark your calendars. Be sure to set your alarm clock. You never want to miss our show. We try to make it as educational and as dumb at the same time as we possibly can. We try. We do the best we can.
And everybody, don't forget to check out Jason's book, Unrested Peace.
Unrested Peace. It's a nice little tale about some paranormal phenomena that I encountered as a teenager. And it's also got some sex in it, too, and drugs. So you definitely don't want to miss that.
It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby.
And ghosts.
And ghosts. What more could you want?
I don't think you could have else. But it's great. So until next week, everyone, Jodi and I will check you out later.
Bye.
Bye.